muting your mics and using the chat box for questions to the speakers. I am Guia Gilardoni, in charge for the international relation at the ISMU Foundation. And let me start by presenting what is in the report, which is accessible on ISMU Foundation website in open access. So feel free to download. Being the 30 anniversaries of the report, the intent here is not only to give the usual annual overview on migration phenomenon and its dynamics in Italy, but also and more to provide the readers with a diachronic view of how migration impacted Italian society, the responses from different institutional bodies and services, and the open challenges it all implies. The report includes 4 parts. So you will find first part on flows, presence, and citizenship, with chapters analyzing 30 years of migration in Italy, with attention to legislative developments. Second, inclusion and coexistence, with chapter examining labor, welfare, education, health, and religion, assessing institutional responses and future challenges. Third, Italy in the European and global context, with a comparative data and political reflection on borders, public opinion, mobility, and of course, the new European Pact on Migration and Asylum. And fourth, differences and inequalities, addressing emerging issues such as media narratives, disability, remittances, and artificial intelligence impact on discrimination. So over the last 30 years, the systematic empirical monitoring provided by ISMU supports the idea of continuity. More precisely, it shows a progressive sedimentation of the migrant presence in Italy, surrounded by events like EU enlargement, the inclusion of new member states with high migratory pressure towards Italy, as for instance, the case of Romania, regularization procedures, economic and humanitarian crisis we've been through, all events that accelerated certain trends and triggered new ones. At the same time, our analysis showed how the Italian society has profoundly changed, coming to the terms with its transformation into a multi-ethnic and multi-religious society, not without difficulties or conflicts. As it regards institutional responses, the common narrative, definitely amplified by the media, emphasized discontinuity with overused terms like turning point, shift, and change of course. However, the ISMU analysis confirmed a continuity pattern where decisions are taken incrementally, often leading to similar solutions regardless of political polarization or polarization among different parties. So the instability or fragmentation happening within this substantial continuity is mainly because while problems change over time, we assist a lack of innovation within political solution due to a sort of institutional isomorphism and a quite stable status quo of the migration governance ecosystem in the country. That being said, the commitment of ISMU Foundation in study migration, its drivers and effects, is based on a multidisciplinary approach that I'm sure you will recognize in the report, which aims at dealing properly with the complexity of the phenomenon. But now I'm very happy to introduce our first speaker, Professor Livia Ortensi, member of the Scientific Committee of ISMU Foundation. She is a demographer who will tell us about the demographic composition of migrant population in Italy, how it's changed over the years. The contribution will be followed by a Q&A session of about 5 minutes, so please feel free to use the chat box to write your questions. Please, Livia, the floor is yours.
Okay, so I hope everyone sees my screen. Now, okay. So what I would like to do today is to give you an idea of where we come from over the point of view of immigration and where we are heading to. So we are basically looking at 3 decades of immigration to Italy, where nowadays migrants gives a significant contribution to Italy's demographic profiles. Italy has a very original story of immigration compared to more classic country of immigration, because there is a beginning in our story as a country of immigration. And immigration has always been characterized by the dynamic interplay of country of origin push factors and Italian pull factor. And migrants' flow to Italy have always been quite responsive to geopolitical transformations over the year. Italy had a very rapid population growth between 2001 and 2011, and then this became more slow. And after a very rapid beginning, we observed a transition of migrants into what we call a demographically relevant population, that is forming family and giving birth. That also gave way to a small, that is now concluded, baby boom, with the rising of families and lots of newborn children, and that gives us for a moment the impression that migrant fertility was very high and could very much sustain the very low Italian fertility, which is not the case, because now we know that migrants have a fertility of 1.9, so it's not so high to sustain relevantly the Italian fertility. And then after, since 2014, Italy has received a lot of migration flow from asylum seekers, and then had a lot of asylum requests. And what we are seeing now is an increasing attention to citizenship, because many people is transitioning to Italian citizenship. That is an indicator of a more settled population. So where we are now, we now, as today, have count and estimate 5.8 million foreign citizenship. Most of them are legally resident, and then we have 5% of irregular migrants. There are 300,000 irregular migrants that are estimated, and they are slowing because this is an effect of the last amnesty of 2020. Then as Italy become a very mature country, we cannot only count foreign citizen, because a lot of people is gaining the citizenship. So we have to look at the interplay between citizenship and place of birth. So as we look at these two indicators measuring the population with a foreign background, we can say that as of today in Italy, 12.4% of the population has a migratory background, with 1.08 million people who was born abroad and later naturalized. So it's very important to look at both indicators to understand how Italy is becoming diverse and complex. Also, we have, as we know, that Italy is a country with very different patterns across territory. Migrants, we also have to say that migrants are more attracted to the central and northern part of Italy. And this is where we also see people acquiring the Italian citizenship more often, and more often the presence of families. So the center north is becoming the part with a more settled population, while the south has a more limited migration phenomenon and is characterized by less stability and or long-term settlement. So we have two Italies in terms of migration. I would also like to do an overview of emergency migration flows, because we know that this is not a main part of migration, but is relevant anyway. So Italy is in the first line in the arrivals from the sea. In 2024, we saw a general decline in arrivals. This is mostly due to the decline in departures from Tunisia, and this is due to political to the fact that there was a deal with Tunisia, and this also results in a shift in the nationalities that arrived through the years. So Bangladesh is along with Syria are the two main nationalities that we see at the arrival in 2024. This is mostly due to the fact that most arrivals are from Libya. This also gave ways, of course, not all asylum applicants arrive from the sea, but when arrivals from the sea are high for many years, we see a rise in asylum application, and we saw approximately 160 application in 2024, and these are mostly from people from Bangladesh, Peru, Pakistan, and Egypt, and this is not surprising because Bangladesh is rising as a community in Italy, and people from Bangladesh arrive both from the land and from the sea. So it's not surprising to see it as the first community among applicants. What happens to application once they are presented? Most people is unfortunately rejected. 64% of application ended up in a rejection in 2024, which is higher than the EU average. But this is due to the fact that people coming from countries with a high rejection rate tend to be overrepresented in the population of applicants in Italy. Egypt, Algeria, Tunisia, and Morocco have very high rejection rates, while people from Somalia, Afghanistan, and Venezuela, and Ukraine, of course, have very low rejection rates in Italy, as happens in all EU countries. So what are the take-home message that we want to start with today? We have a story that is now done of 30 years that has been marked by multiple phases. And now we continue a trend toward consolidation of a long-term resident population with a small increase in asylum seeker and people and arrivals from the sea. we also saw a recent decline in the irregular migration component, which is due to the results of the amnesty. So it's probably temporary, and we expect it to grow a bit in the next years. And of course, as other country, Italy is seeing an increased volatility and unpredictability of asylum seeker and unrelated migration flows, because these are very dependent on politics and on the general overall situation. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Livia, for your presentation, which was quite detailed and hopefully clear. So I'm wondering whether we have questions from the audience or comments. So please feel free to raise your hand or... Okay, the first I see in my screen is Luca Barani from the European Commission. Please, Luca.
Yes, thank you very much, Guia. Just to mention the fact that very soon the European Commission is going to present the first cyclical report on waves and on situational preparedness, specifically on the component that you just mentioned now that is very volatile, which is the asylum and also to a certain extent irregular arrivals by boat, less by land. So it is definitely topical in this respect. However, I just wanted to mention that me personally, I'm more interested in the, so to speak, in the equilibrium of the more regular one, because I think that, as you mentioned, there is a bit of there are phases, of course, over 30 years, but would you have a more stylized way to define these phases, and if there are structural drivers of these phases that you identified? Thank you.
Yes, well, I see it from the point of view of demography mostly. So I would say that there is a first phase that is the first of the first comers. So people arriving, mostly male for some communities and female from other communities. Then there is a phase of family formation with lots of birth and children in the school, and we see more in-depth transformation deriving from migration in the Italian society. And I would say that now we are in the consolidation phase with a debate on citizenship, with second generation that are increasingly entering the job market, and this will be crucial to understand if second generation will have a job market integration different from those of their parents, because we know that the job market in Italy is dual, and the integration is a sort of integration on jobs that are dirty, less paid, and dangerous, the 3D of the job market. So I would say that are in this phase, and we are also dealing with asylum, but we are not alone in this. This is more European, while the phase of consolidation is typically Italian, I would say.
Thank you, Livia, and thank you, Luca, for your question. Then Luca is relaunching, writing basically no legislative or administrative adaptation to these phases, but we also have another question from Sebnen Kozer Akapar. The question is, how can we analyze these statistics within 30 years with politics and economy? And you have only 1 minute to respond.
Oh. I would say that, well, it's very long. I will need a lot of time, but I think there is a debate on how immigration impact in some crucial aspects like innovation, job productivity, and so on. And also, I would say that there is a lack of reflection, of a mature reflection on migration in our political debate. So it's very difficult to study and to talk about migration, leaving alone ideas of if it's good, is it necessary, is it's we cannot deal with it. So it's complex. I think that despite 30 years of migration, we need a more, again, to try to do a more complex discourse on migration. We are still not mature on this point of view. So,
thank you, Livia. Thank you, Livia. So now I will pass the floor to Marta Regalia, which will contribute on quite different topic. Marta is a professor at University of Eastern Piedmont, presenting her analysis of the recent referendum on citizenship and reflection on future prospects. Also here, there will be a Q&A session at the end. So please, Marta, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guia. Good afternoon, everyone. So the ISMU report has a chapter on citizenship with a legal approach. Obviously, it doesn't reflect the results of the referendum of 2 weeks ago. However, we think that it's important to speculate on the referendum on citizenship. And spoiler, the outcome was negative for the naturalization of non-EU citizens. On June 8-9, Italy held 5 referenda, one of which asked Italian citizens to review the rules on the naturalization of non-EU citizens. The question regarding citizenship, you can see it in the screen, aimed to modify the 1992 law facilitating the naturalization of foreigners who today can only apply after 10 years of legal and uninterrupted residence. The proposal was to halve to 5 years the time needed for the acquisition of citizenship, therefore facilitating many adult foreigners and also consequently their cohabiting minor children who would become citizens with the naturalization of their parents. No other requirement like income, the absence of criminal record, the knowledge of the Italian language would have been changed by the referendum. In Italy, to be valid, a referendum needs to reach a quorum, the 50% plus 1 of the voters, of those entitled to vote. No one of the 5 referenda reached the quorum as expected, and only about 30% of the Italian voted. 4 of the 5 referenda related to the job market and were promoted by the main Italian trade union. Since right-wing voters mainly decided not to go to the polls, as their party suggested, people who participated in the vote were mainly left-wing. And this is the reason why the most striking news relates to the result of the referendum on citizenship, because while little less than 90% of voters approved the first 4 referenda, only about 65% of voters agreed with the proposed reform of citizenship law. And this, as said, among the 14 million of people which are tendentially left-wing. This result was for sure counterproductive to the cause that referendum promoters were supporting. And I guess no one in the next 10 to 20 years will try a reform of citizenship law. I'll try to propose you some reflection on these results. Why are the Italians so conservative? To better understand the context of opinion in which the referendum on citizenship took place, we can look at survey data from SVG. Francesca, thank you. In the long run, meaning the last 25 years, we see that you can find those data in the report. We can see that in general, the attitude toward immigration have changed for the better. The percentage of interviewees who consider immigration a resource for the country has increased from 41 to 57%. On the contrary, on the other hand, even the narrative of immigrant as a source of job insecurity for Italians, they used to say they steal our jobs, is no longer as convincing as it once was. In 1998, 54% of interviewees believed that immigrants took away jobs opportunity from Italians. In 2023, the percentage dropped to 32. If we then look at Eurobarometer data, we at ISMU have noticed that, Francesca, next slide, that a paradox has been present for many years now. Immigration is widely perceived as a collective problem to which member states must respond, but it does not seem to have priority at individual level. So if you ask citizens which are the top two priorities facing your country, immigration is often mentioned. But if you ask the same people which are the top two priorities you are facing, immigration is not mentioned or less frequently mentioned. And this is true, as you can see, across all Europe. What can explain this contradiction? We can hypothesize that here two prominent actors shape the way public opinion look at immigration: the mass media and the political parties. On the one hand, mass media, due to their intrinsic way of functioning, tend to frame the phenomenon by overexposing negative events, which often arouse more interest than stories with happy ending. And on the other hand, politicians, mostly right-wing, xenophobic, nationalist, for their own interest, tend to ride this news sensationalism and use it to frame their programmatic point around which they can play a role in the political arena. To this, we can add that policy responses are often insufficient. So immigration continues to be perceived as a problem, despite most interviewees in Italy and in Europe believe that migrants are a resource. From a political science point of view, the ISMU made a reflection also on the 2024 European election. You can find it in the report. And already there, we could see how the issue related to citizenship was difficult to face, not only because right-wing, nationalist and xenophobic parties convinced a large part of the electorate, but also because part of the center-left electorate thinks that immigration could take away their acquired right, especially in the welfare state. I think that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marta, for your overview. Are there any questions or comments from the audience? Well, oh, okay, Luca, please.
I think also that there is a problem, that there is also a half that is missing here, which is how Italians portray themselves collectively as a nation of immigrants, because since 2008, there is a reactivation of all this kind of people going abroad, and this also has quite an impact on, so to speak, on the mass media, but also there is a strong left-right divide, because unfortunately the people that go abroad are more educated and tend to vote more on the left. So there is also a different political constituency for this. So this is also part, in my view, of the general landscape of Italians, so to speak, collective ideas of how mobility for Italians is also an opportunity or something else, which is part, in my view, is part of the national discourse.
Yes, but they also used to be more keen at going through all the administrative procedures for voting abroad. While the other Italian long-term residents abroad, which are more conservative, are not so so keen to go through this burden of all the paperwork needed to vote. So this part of the electorate tend to vote more, but of course not as much as Italian residents. That's true.
Thank you, Luca, for your comments, and to you, Marta, for responding. We also have a question in the chat box. Thank you, Sebnen Kozara-Kapar, for your question. I'm going to read it. Why do you think immigration is a bigger problem for some countries and less so for others? Is it mere statistics, number, or people coming, or is it related with dominant political parties and populist discourse?
I think it is related to two aspects. Of course, how the media and the political party frame the issue, but also the kind of policies that those countries were able to enact, so to implement. If the country has a strong difficulty in dealing with the issue that immigration brings about, it is easier for nationalist, populist, etc., political party to ride the issue. Otherwise, the problem is less felt by the electorate.
Thank you, Marta. There's also another question from Apak Kerem Alitintop. Sorry for the surely wrong pronunciation. As Eurobarometers shows, there is a significant difference between those who say it is a problem for the country and those who say it is a problem for them individually. The fact that migration is always treated as a new issue is used as an excuse to take new strict measures. How should we explain people that migration itself is not a bad thing, but its management can be problematic?
Because most of the people don't see those problems directly in their life, but maybe they look at the news, they hear what politician says, and so they feel that there is a problem because someone is telling them there is a problem, even if they don't experience it really in their lives. It's the narrative.
Yes, indeed. And it is probably also much more difficult for the common sense to think about how problematic management governance is instead of using the typical dynamic of capo espiatorio, saying that those are the guilty.
Scapegoat.
The scapegoat. Oh, thank you for that. The scapegoat dynamic that, of course, is quite functional to the system. Another question from Sebnem Kozara-Kapar. Are Italian people happy with Meloni's migration policies in general? Ooh, big question.
I really don't know, but I think yes. They voted for her, so yes, they should.
Yeah. This is we take the question more like a provocation. It's very difficult to answer. We will see in the next election, I would say. If there are no any other questions or comments, I thank you, Marta,
Thank you.
for your insights on a quite interesting topic. And I'm now going to introduce as our third and last speaker, Luca Merotta, Senior Researcher and Project Manager at ISMU, who will give us 3 highlights from the second part of the report. The one on inclusion and coexistence, with spotlight specifically on education, labor, and health. So please note that here there will not be Q&A session, but we kindly address you to the report, where you will find more details on what we touch upon here, plus many other information. So please, Luca, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Guia. Thank you, and good afternoon to everyone. So, as Guia was mentioning, we are trying to, condense as much key information on key aspects of society, where the latest report on migration, highlighted some key evolution over the past 30 years, and we have selected 3 chapters to do so. So the chapter on employment looks, first of all, at data in terms of number of non-Italian workers who now represent, last year in 2023, represented 2.3 million people, accounting for approximately 10% of the total number of workers in the country. However, if we look at the unemployment rate among this group, we can already see that there is a discrepancy, because the unemployment rate is 6% higher, so it's 6 percentage points higher than their labor participation rate. Non-Italian workers tend to be predominantly present in some key sectors. First of all, the community, personal and community services, the agricultural sector, hospitality and tourism, and in the construction sector. They also tend to be particularly overrepresented in unskilled jobs, with a figure that is 3 times higher than the equivalent among Italian workers. Likewise, they also tend to be underrepresented among highly skilled workers. The percentage here is a bit over 70% compared to 40% among Italians. The chapter tries to seek a possible explanation to this, and it breaks it down in 2 possible explanations. So on the one hand, there's still a problematic relevance of people's ethnic and national background in how the job opportunities are still allocated. And that affects not only the demand side, but also the supply side, meaning that it also affects migrant communities per se. It is also a qualification problem. For instance, looking at the level of upper secondary education, only 1 in 2 foreigners aged 25 to 64 does have this kind of this level of education, compared to almost 67% of Italians. Or, for instance, university graduates are only 12% among non-Italian workers, compared to almost 23% of Italians. The chapter also tries to look at recent developments, which can be seen as positive developments. So we saw an increase in the authorized entries and an expansion of the out-of-quotas entries, provided that they are paired with pre-departure programs. We also saw the authorization process being greatly digitalized. And also permits can now be converted more easily with no particular caps, meaning from study to work permits, or from fixed-term work permits to permanent work permits. However, some criticality still remains, and the chapter looks at a specific problem, which is the still persistent gap between the legal framework and the real life and real needs, which is somehow confirmed by the low ratio between the quotas, or the applications for permit, and the actual employment contracts that have been signed. Trying to put forward some possible pathways to solutions. The chapters suggest ensuring a stronger legal compliance among all the involved actors and stakeholders, that, in order to truly balance the different aspects that, play out in labor market integration, from recruitment procedures to the fight against frauds. So moving on to the second chapter is considered this presentation, the one on health. Here, the chapter seeks to outline the health conditions of migrants, but also trying to make time comparisons, especially between 2016 or 2018 and 2022 or 2023. So in terms of life habits, generally speaking, we can say that foreigners tend to be have less of a sedentary lifestyle compared to Italians. They also tend to abuse. Over time, we also saw that there was a stronger decrease in alcohol abuse and smoking compared to Italian counterparts. They also generally tend to have a better perception of their own health, especially including the mental health, with a lower incidence of depressive symptoms. On the other hand, however, the foreigners also score less when it comes to healthy eating, and also higher when it comes to obesity rates. In terms of hospitalizations, in 2022 included mainly Europeans outside of Italians, Africans, and Asians. However, when looking at the trying to make the time comparison between 2018 and 2022, we see that hospitalizations of African citizens decreased, while the one of Asians and American citizens did increase. Foreign women were generally underrepresented compared to the resident population, meaning the share of women out of the whole foreign population from certain world regions, which is particularly salient for South Americans, Europeans, and Asians, but also Africans. And when looking at selected nationalities, the chapter also revealed that Ukrainian female patients were the most underrepresented group. The chapter then closes with some data on childbirths, indicating that if on the one hand, the share of childbirths by foreign women has slightly decreased over the past 5 years, between 2018 and 7 years, it still remains significant, especially due to the share of African women who themselves represent almost 1 in 3 of the foreign component. The average age of childbirth also started increasing for foreign women as well, and cesarean sections was a practice that is still more common among Italian women compared to foreign women. However, as a practice, it is decreasing among Italian women and increasing among foreign women. Last but not least, the chapter on education really tried to take stock of 30 years of education policies and education practices that made Italian schools, places for multicultural inclusion. In terms of number, the chapter looks at the evolution of the migrant presence in Italian schools, looking at the number of students with non-Italian citizenship, which has risen from 31,000 units in the early 90s up to almost 1 million in 2022 and 2023, jumping from less than 1% to 11% of all Italian students, all students in Italy. It also breaks down the evolution, the statistical evolution in 4 phases, where we had figures doubling between the early and the late 90s followed by an exponential growth, 10-folds until 2012, 2013, a period of stagnation until 2019, and a fluctuating period due to pandemic, a drop during the pandemic, a surge after the COVID pandemic, and more recently, the considerable inflow of Ukrainian students since 2022. But who are these students? The chapter looks at the kind of the profile, getting to the conclusion that most students come from Romania, Albania, Morocco, and China. And it is interesting to see that 65% of students with non-Italian citizenship were actually born in Italy, making them part of what is often considered as a second-generation migrants. They are mainly concentrated in northern Italy, meaning Lombardy, Emilia-Romagna, Veneto, and Piedmont, but also in central Italy, meaning in Lazio. It's also interesting to see how the selection, the preference of school types has evolved over time. As lyceum's attendance has increased among migrant students, vocational school attendance has declined on the other hand, and technical schools school attendance has remained pretty much stable. There are still some challenges, some long day challenges. For instance, grade retention, with over 1 in 4 students with non-Italian citizenship having to take the same school year over again, compared to 8% of Italians. And so is also the dropout rates, which among students with non-Italian citizenship has an incidence that is more than 3 times to 1 among Italians. In terms of learning outcomes, looking at data from the standardized test, IMBALSI test scores, the chapter indicates that there is still a major gap in learning outcomes when it comes to Italian and maths between first-generation migrant students and second-generation migrant students and Italian-born students. But the situation is flipped when it comes to English, because that's a domain where the performance among first-generation students is higher than the other 2 groups. The chapter closes with some recommendations on how to tackle structural challenges that, if not addressed, can actually worsen over time, especially considering the Italian context. Structural challenges include inequality, education inequality, and school segregation. And the chapter closes by offering some food for thoughts on whether it makes perhaps sense to start including inclusive teaching practices inside the education ecosystem in Italy. So these 3 chapters and the rest of the contributions can be found in the 30th Italian Report on Migrations, which is available as open access. Over to you, Guia.
Thanks a lot, Luca, for your selection of some contents of the report. So let me conclude by thank you all for having been with us today. Please stay tuned on ISMU Foundation events. I'm just flagging up 2 activities among the many we are implementing that will happen in fall. First, there's going to be a webinar from the RISE project, which is for responsible involvement in society and elections project funded by ECAS, European Citizen Action Service, where we are going to present how public opinion across Europe responds to citizenship debates and reflect on the broader societal implication. And we are also launching a new project funded by the European Commission under SERV, which is WING, Empowering Actors in Civic Space Protection, which addressed increasing criminalization of solidarity towards migrants within the EU. And the launch conference of the project will be in September. So please stay tuned, and more information on how to participate will be shared in the next months. Thanks everyone, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye.